Hi everybody, my name is Nick Bradshaw. I'm the CEO of AI Media Group. We're the curators of AI Expo Africa, and it gives me great pleasure to welcome you to my presentation at the show, Mapping the Emerging African AI Landscape, Trends and Observations. Just before we kick off, I'd like to offer a warm welcome to you all who've joined us at the show, whether you're here for the live element of the show or the on-demand conference, which you can watch 24/7. You're welcome to get in contact with me after the presentation, and we're very happy to discuss the insights that we're going to share with you today and how we can improve them for the future. So just a little bit about AI Media so you understand who we are. We're essentially a hybrid media consulting and events company, and we're focused on the African artificial intelligence and 4IR sector. It's obviously an emerging sector in this particular region, and we basically started doing work towards the end of 2017 when we realized that the knowledge base and understanding of the commercial and industrial AI landscape on the African continent was either fragmented or there was quite a bit of data missing at that time. Essentially, we do four key things. We run this event, which you're joining us today. We publish the Synapse magazine, which is a trade publication, which is free to read. You can get a copy at our booth or in the resource center at the show at the moment. We do industry analysis and consulting, so anything to do with inward and outward trade, introductions, and also consulting around the kind of information that I'm going to be sharing with you today. And the final thing is we're helping build a robust, inclusive and diverse African AI ecosystem. Our focus is very much on the trade and industry side of the coin, but there's obviously many other AI ecosystems, particularly in the academic and research sectors across the continent, in the NGO sector, and in the charity, incubator and accelerator sectors as well. Our vision was basically really simple. We want to build the largest business-to-business, trade-focused AI community in Africa. And we wanted this community to be a catalyst for bringing people together, people to people, people to businesses, businesses to knowledge, businesses to businesses, very much connecting people together, connecting people to knowledge, and for it to be a catalytic stimulus for our region, both locally, if you're in your city, at the country level, and at the continental level as well. We broadly day to day are all about, as I said before, connecting people, sharing knowledge, showcasing the best of African innovation. We want to signpost people to education opportunities and also provide them ourselves. We do free workshops. There's a lot of training and program material at the show today, and you just need to go into the resource center and check out the vendor booths to explore that more fully. We also provide support to governments and trade associations and forums where people are trying to better understand and apply this knowledge. And the final thing is we're trying to connect people to real opportunities, business opportunities, employment opportunities, or investment opportunities. So the bag of money will look different depending on who you are and which of those value chains you actually find yourself in. In terms of the wider ecosystem, it's not just about talking to the likes of Amazon and Microsoft and NVIDIA and Intel, the usual suspects at the corporate end of the spectrum. It's very much about an inclusive spectrum, what we call the 4IR economic pipeline. It starts with people in previously disadvantaged communities, through to schooling, primary and secondary, through to ongoing educational programs in colleges and universities, then into the postgraduate R&D community, and then into the more entrepreneurial, startup, SME, and then scale up into then obviously global corporates. Every party along that spectrum can play a role. Some of the entry points into the programs and resources that are on offer are often free. Obviously, we know there are connectivity issues in some parts of every country on the continent, but there are communities working on providing resources. For example, Data Science Nigeria, we provide a pack which can be used by people who can't connect to the internet. So they can collect learning and training materials and then use them locally where they don't have connectivity. But essentially, if we can join up this pipeline and get information and collaboration going between these interfaces, we believe that we can create a very vibrant 4IR and AI opportunity for everybody across the continent. As I mentioned before, we work with trade associations and trade missions, both inward and outward. So helping organizations arrive on the African continent who maybe don't have a presence here. They may be looking for distributors or partners wanting to sell direct. And equally, we're also working with organizations to help them find markets abroad. And again, we can do industry introductions and connect people into key points of contact to accelerate that process. So if we start to look at the mapping of the ecosystem, when we started, there was very little information about this landscape. And we decided to start to do our own research and reach out to people in all the various different communities that are around. But in terms of authoritative, in-depth research, one of the first things I came across was the Oxford Insights AI Readiness report, which is a global report. It pulls in multiple sources of information, and it's a multi-threaded survey that goes out, an analysis that's actually performed. And it was very interesting to see, obviously, the global north, if we can call it that, is often seen and quantified as being the most ready to embrace the AI or 4IR revolution that's actually happening at the moment. And this is looking at the sort of government readiness. So how ready at the national level are you to, as a country, to take advantage of this opportunity? Now, obviously, the darker the area, the more ready the country is, and the less darker, the less ready the country is. But there are some emerging highlights on the African continent. If we look at Kenya, it was the first country to publish its national AI strategy, allied to a blockchain strategy. If you look at countries like Tunisia, South Africa, also emerging into that space now and starting to put together formal strategies. And you can listen to an update on the strategies from Tunisia and Kenya at the show from the people leading those activities. And also we've got some best practice from America and also Brazil in terms of their recently launched AI strategy. So an AI strategy from another BRICS country. So we're emerging, and we are starting to get to grips with this opportunity, and we can learn obviously from other countries along the way. Then if we start to look at the responsible deployment of AI, there's also another secondary part to the Oxford Insights research, which was looking at the completeness of deploying AI responsibly and ethically. And again, we see the same sort of trend, the global north pioneering in that space, and then other countries, particularly in Africa and BRICS, South America, some of the Middle Eastern countries, slightly further behind. Obviously, countries like Dubai, UK, Canada, America, definitely leading the way. If we look at the creation of the Abu Dhabi AI-only university, there's some very interesting things going on. And clearly the ethical, transparency, explainability aspects of AI are at the societal level, business level, and personal level, allied to things like data privacy, are key and just as important as having a national strategy as well. So again, I encourage people to look at these resources. They're fairly in-depth, very comprehensive, and there's a breakdown then by each region, which you can see on the Oxford Insights website. If we look at the investment landscape, so let's move on to that. So some fantastic resources by Maxime Byam and Max Kilver, who've been doing some amazing infographics on all sorts of activity to do with investment into the tech space across the African continent. I'd say this is probably the most authoritative analysis that's out there at the moment. And essentially what we can see is there's 4 main tech hubs. So investment drives innovation, that drives company growth, that drives employment, that drives taxation, which then feeds back into the economy. So where you see investment, typically you will see a growing economy. And if we look at Africa, we see 4 main tech investment hubs: Egypt, Kenya, South Africa, Nigeria. Each has its own dynamic. Each is very different in terms of some of the influences that are happening in those regions. So Egypt's very influenced by Europe and the Middle East. Kenya, very influenced by Middle East and India. And if we look at Nigeria, significantly influenced by Europe and the North American diaspora. And then South Africa traditionally has been the longest standing developed economy in the African or sub-Saharan African continent. And it has already a fairly well-established tech ecosystem and sophisticated investment ecosystem as well. So essentially, if you're wanting to place your bets on where's most of the action happening and where most of these tech companies are going to emerge, then those would be your northeast, south, and west points of the compass. Clearly, the satellite countries around each of these regions are also really advancing rapidly. Countries like Tanzania, Tunisia, Ghana, growing very rapidly in terms of their sophistication of their investment ecosystems. Some amazing startups coming out from those regions as well. So check out the Maxim and Max's LinkedIn profiles and check out their analysis and research that they're doing. They update it very frequently, and the entry point to some of the information is free, and if not, it's fairly low cost, but the research that they do is amazing. If we then break that down by sector, so broadly speaking in Africa, a lot of the tech investment has been into the fintech sector. That's a very mature market, driven by things like mobile money, crypto, mobile telephony. Now we're looking at decentralized finance. That has been an area where things like e-commerce, etc., are really driving that on the African continent, and hence it attracts most investment at the moment. If you look at deep tech, which you could broadly say encompasses AI and related technologies, that's a much smaller segment at the moment. But AI is also a cross-cutting technology. So clearly you could have a fintech solution which is AI-driven. So at the moment, it's not necessarily designated as a sector or an investment category in its own right at the moment. But as you can see from this particular graph, it's there. It's on the horizon, and it's obviously going to grow over time. If we look at that, the most up-to-date information from Maxim and Max, you can obviously see that, again, it maps broadly onto that map that I talked about. If we look at the 2021, the first half of this year, again, we're seeing a lot of deal activity in Nigeria, Egypt, Kenya, South Africa, Ghana, and Tunisia, and also Morocco and satellite countries as well. So, it's very dynamic. I think their current analysis for this year is already ahead of the total from 2020. So positive indicators of growth, and probably also positive indicators that the African continent is going to see substantially more investment in the coming months and years, particularly from outside of the continent. In our own analysis as well, we've readily identified that there is this big funding gap between the universities and the research that's going on, and then spinning that out into the early stage, so from ID or fundamental R&D into a new startup or a new venture. I think that is a big opportunity for investors, clearly much higher risk. The risk appetite for VCs and investors in the African market typically tends to be skewed towards the growth sector. So once companies are established and been trading, then the investor the investors follow in with their own money. But the early stage, seed, pre-seed, that's still a massive area for growth. And there are now more investments happening in that particular sector of the market. So what we've set out to do is to look at the entire AI ecosystem. So what we've been doing is we've been looking at companies that come onto our radar, doing our own research. We've looked at about 1,500 companies. We've got almost 1,400 complete entries on the research that we've done. And then we try to break it down as to where those companies are headquartered. So these are companies that are using AI, developing AI solutions and products, or they're involved in that particular segment. So it may be a fintech product that they sell principally, but it's got an AI component in it. So we've got this healthy ecosystem. Again, this information didn't exist a few years ago, and we've been trying to piece it together. There's still a lot more work to do on this, but as we can see, we have a very healthy local AI ecosystem on the African continent. And then clearly we've got companies from North America, Asia, the Middle East, LATAM, Europe, who are also interested in this region. But those companies that are here may be, they don't have a physical presence here, their headquarters is in another country, and they're selling through partners or resellers or distributors. But now we're obviously starting to see that emergence of them wanting to have a direct presence in the region. So as they grow, they're starting to see the African market as a go-to market to sell directly. Traditionally, it's always been a partner sell if you're selling a complex technology or a services-based technology. And then you've got this kind of double sort of or competing matrix between pure play AI products companies and then AI solutions companies. So a company that will build you a solution to a problem, or a company that will, you can subscribe to a platform that provides you with an out-of-the-box solution or an API into your own solution. So it's a very complex and rapidly changing environment. We've then broken that down to the companies solely on the African continent. And then when we look at that dynamic, we see that most of them are in South Africa. Perhaps unsurprisingly, it has the most mature, longest standing, traditionally the largest GDP. I don't think it is the largest GDP anymore, overtaken by Nigeria now, but traditionally that ecosystem has just resulted in more companies. But then if you look at the sort of second, third, fourth, fifth, and sixth, then you're looking at Tunisia, Nigeria, Kenya, Egypt, and Ghana, quickly followed by Morocco and Mauritius and others. So, you know, we've got this healthy ecosystem. It is growing, but South Africa at the moment still has the most companies, but we're seeing a rapid increase in the others as well. If we then look at where those companies are based, particularly I'm just going to choose South Africa, we can see that if you look at the Johannesburg and Pretoria, which are fairly close together in South Africa in terms of the capitals, in the Gauteng and Tshwane region, then most of the companies are actually based in those two particular regions, followed by Cape Town and then followed by KZN. And then if we look at the sectors that these companies are operating in or have been labelled as operating in, it's pretty much, as I mentioned before, cross-cutting. Yeah, you've got companies in pretty much every single sector, and as AI is going to impact every industrial sector and probably most aspects of society, this is an unsurprising graph. Obviously, you'd expect, this is not even a complete list that you can see here, as the list is actually too big to fit on the screen. But essentially, ICT, computer software, you've got obviously financial services, internet, telecoms. These are all sectors which are embracing these technologies, and solutions are being created for them. If we look at ownership, then the bulk of them are privately owned. That I don't think comes as any surprise. Clearly, companies playing in this space like Intel, Nvidia, Microsoft, Amazon, obviously they're publicly listed, and there's plenty of those as well. But broadly speaking, you've got privately held companies leading the way, and they predominate the most in terms of ownership in this particular space. Now, if we look at the growth, we just looked at the year founded for the companies that we've analysed. Clearly, you see this dip around 2006, 2010. Clearly, this is kind of like pre the sort of 4IR nomenclature which we're all familiar with now. It's not to say that there weren't companies around there. There clearly were companies around, but the year founded and then the increase that we're seeing in the number of these companies is clearly showing growth. So, you know, companies that never traditionally had AI as an offering, core offering that you could purchase from them, now have it. And what we're seeing is an increase in the number of those companies, which I guess is a very positive sign for the future. If we quickly look at the skills analysis as well, and this was some information that we got from an executive briefing from LinkedIn in 2019, and just homing in on South Africa and looking at data science, artificial intelligence, and cloud computing. The bulk of the jobs that are in demand, particularly in this region, are in Johannesburg. I think some of the challenges that we're particularly seeing here, and this now post-pandemic, or maybe a more global challenge now, is that for every one professional gained and one job created in that sector, we're actually losing 2.4 to other countries. So that's sort of showing that highly skilled people are emigrating. I don't know what the dynamic now is on that. You can work from home now and work in a job in London or New York or Singapore. It's much more readily accepted. So I'll be very interested to see what the dynamic is on this particular sector post-pandemic. I think that would be a useful follow-up to this particular slide. But the challenge that we have now is that the shelf life of skills in these particular categories are short-lived. It's so rapidly evolving. There's new things happening all the time that it's literally impossible to keep up. Even if you're involved in the industry, it's a challenge to stay up to date and relevant. So constant training, constant learning, and that probably is going to provide a big challenge for government agencies, education departments, putting together syllabuses to essentially prepare people for the new world of work. If we then look at the community itself, we have mapped over, I think we've got over 200 partners that we've mapped in the community sector, what we define as people driving the industry, whether it's academic, NGO, philanthropic, charity. We've got accelerators, incubators, other communities as well, other events as well. So again, plenty of resources to check out and learn more about. If you want to go and check out the resource center, there's a lot of information in there as well. And then if we look at demands, you know, it's fairly clear that the top 4 or 5 things: RPA, big data analytics and insights, conversational interfaces, machine learning and deep learning point solutions. Those are the key things driving our industry, as well as IoT and smart hardware, smart technologies associated with that. So this is information from our buyer survey last year. Also interestingly, it's very interesting to see that people are interested in virtual reality, and obviously with recent developments in things like the metaverse, that will be interesting to see how that category also emerges in the coming years. And then finally, policy and the softer issues to do with deploying AI. Big opportunity here for consulting services. Organizations don't necessarily have the capability to have an in-house expert craft a policy around the deploying these technologies. So explainability, transparency, bias, ethical deployment. That's an area where a lot of companies are telling us that they need help. And then finally, what we're trying to do is match investors to capital. We created at the beginning of this year a new feature on our website called the Deal Room. You can submit to that for, it's a free service. You can submit a very short pitch by a series of questions and answers. And we then pass that on to some pre-screened investors that are interested in looking at such propositions. So if you're looking for funding, please check out the Deal Room. It's definitely worth looking at. So I just want to say thank you very much for allowing me 30 minutes of your time to talk about our work here at AI Media. Clearly, the event that we put on every year is just one aspect of what we do. The analysis and the research that I presented to you is in constant refinement, and we're adding new companies to it all the time. And if you would like to reach out and have a conversation with us about that, then you can contact me at the AI Media Group. My contact details are here. and I'll be very happy to explore your inputs, ideas, and partnering around how we can improve and refine the data going forward. So I just want to say again, thank you for joining me. Thank you for joining our event. Wherever you are in the world, do get in contact. I think we've got 5 minutes left now for some Q&A, which I'll handle in the chat text box. You can come and visit us on the AI Media booth, and you can check out some of the resources as well that we've put into the resource center for you. Do enjoy the show, do network, and wishing you well for the rest of the show. Thanks very much.